Hi and welcome to Ask GMBN Tech, the weekly Q&A session. If you've got any questions, whatever they may be, around mountain bike tech, could be about old tech, retro tech, new stuff, stuff of the future, gearboxes, even e-bike stuff, whatever you want to ask us about, get involved in the comments down there. Use the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech. And also, if you don't already subscribe to the channel, please do subscribe. It's free content. Put content up at the moment 4 times a week. We're going to be moving it up at some point soon as well. So loads of free content to tell you all about bikes. Right, moving on. First question this week. This is a banging question. I can't believe no one's asked this. From David_790. If 29-inch wheels are so good for covering ground, why do we even start on 26-inch? Road bikes have been 700c from the beginning, right? Well, all right, in reverse. Not sure about that with road bikes. I think road bikes have played around with size over years, but regardless, get your point. They've basically been on 700c wheels for a long time. Right, so the short answer to your question is that's what was available at the time. So when those early clunkers were adapting essentially old paperboy bikes, kind of like this one right here next to me, which you might not be able to see just on camera there. Think of it as a bit like the hot rod era in the cars. There were a whole bunch of bikes that were born from parts left over. Now, one of those things left over was the big fat tyres you used to see on those paperboy bikes. And one of the most famous ones was a Uniroyal tyre called the Nobby. And I've got one here that was on that bike, but it's perished, so we can't actually put it on there anymore. Now, this tyre, pretty much you could say that this tyre was responsible for mountain biking having 26-inch wheels, which is pretty cool. And you look at it and, all right, so by today's standards, it's kind of laughable, but there's not a bad shoulder on there at all. The central tread, all right, it's a bit closely packed, but given what they were doing at the time, more than adequate tyre. It's also like quite solid casing on there as well, surprisingly so, which combined with the big 40mm steel rims they were running, meant they pretty much didn't suffer from pinch punctures and all the stuff that we've later had, ironically, despite the fact we've been changing technology. So essentially, the answer is the fact it was already there. You think about getting tyre moulds done and they're experimenting and stuff. They didn't have the time to sort of experiment with tyres because they're too busy trying to figure everything out. So that's really how we started on the 26-inch wheels. And of course, since then, some of those early innovators, Gary Fisher, for example, was experimenting with 29-inch wheels, but there wasn't really a market for it at the time. So they just continued with 26, and obviously much later we went to 29s. But yeah, it's just possible that if in those early days someone committed to a tyre mould, we might have been 29-inch wheels from the very start, and we might never have seen 26 or even 650B or 27.5. Next question from Lloyd Beaumont. Do you have any experience of waxing chains? No, I don't. It seems like a no-brainer for the road, but yet I'm yet to take the plunge for UK mountain bike conditions. Now, recently we had Lewis Lacey, who works at Muck-Off in their sort of special products development area there. We asked him about waxing chains, and he actually said, yeah, it is good, but, and there is a but, you've got to be a sort of person that meticulously cleans your chain, and also to properly wax the chain, you've got to remove it from your bike. So you're going to need a selection of joining links, whatever brand that is, that correlates to your particular chain. And then, of course, there's how long it's going to last. Now, those that we've spoken to that do run stuff, they've tried stuff like from Absolute Black and various other brands, they do say it's very, very good, especially for drier, grittier conditions. But I don't know too much about wet conditions. I've never tried it. And honestly, it's because I've never been bothered to try it, because I'm not going to take my chain off to wax it and do that when, let's face it, I'd rather just get my bike as clean as possible, get some fresh lube on there, wait for it to sort of soak in, rub it off, and then go straight up on the hills again. You know, it's pretty much just want to sort of rinse and repeat. But I'm definitely interested from anyone that has properly waxed the chain like I'm referencing. Should we actually try it, or are we wasting our times? And hopefully that might help you answer your question, because I'm not so sure it's to benefit to most mountain bikers. For sure, there'll be some people that get like some friction benefits out of this, but given the work you've got to do, like the prep work, I'm not so sure it's going to be the best thing. Next up from Matthias Johansson, my bad. Interesting that you went for Industry 9 wheels on your bike build. Okay, so that's on the Mondraker that I built for the Shimano video a while back. The combo of alloy rims, the way the spokes work, and that hub leave lots of unanswered questions for me. Do you know, I did actually make a video all about that hub, so you're going to find out a bit more about that on the channel soon. But your two questions here that you've written are, do they have a carbon rim option? They do. I don't know if they do it in the exact model I had, but they've got plenty of carbon rim models on the website. I chose alloy for a reason, because I just genuinely like the way it rides. And for the spec that I went there for the 270s, so 27mm internal width, they just feel perfect to me for the way I like to ride. And you also said, why do they have a one-piece spoke that thread into the hub? So on typical spokes, you get two major types. You get straight pull, you got it wrong, and J-bend spokes. So the J-bend spokes have a little curve at the top where they hook into the hub, and that is a classic area where they can break at that bend. But the other area the spokes tend to break will be near the threads, because the threads are cut into the spoke, and then the join between roughly where the top of the nipple is and where the spoke is there, you think there where the thread starts cutting into the spoke, it's the thinnest part. So you've almost, I guess, like a stress riser. So they're the two weak points and they can break there. So Industry 9 thought, well, you know, we'll make some J-bend spoke hubs, we'll make some conventional hubs, but let's also make a no compromise one. So they're making theirs fully out of aluminium. These spokes are absolutely beautiful. I think they're 25 to 30% bigger than a conventional spoke. So they distribute the forces slightly differently. The threaded section that screws into the hub is bigger than the actual spoke. So they're actually not having that same issue that you're going to get with conventional spokes. And of course, at the other end, it doesn't have a nipple. The nipple is actually shaped onto the spoke itself. So you literally push the spoke through the rim, thread it into the hub, and you would adjust it from the fact it's got effectively a nipple built onto the spoke itself. But it's just a really smart way of making a no compromise approach to what they wanted. As they know, as many wheel builders know, a wheel, you can't just make a wheel the stiffest thing possible. It has to have flex and compliance in order to give you traction, but also for the wheel to work properly. And those wheels are an excellent example of that. So there is a video coming up where I take apart the hub and I sort of compare it to a more conventional style hub. So if you want to know a bit more about the Hydra system, which I guess you'd say is like a super hub compared to a regular one, watch that video. It should tell you a little bit more. But yeah, really interesting stuff and lovely wheels. And each one is meticulously handmade as well. So a really nice brand, I think, to buy into. Next up from Yoin_Mathis. With the Linkglide seeming to be more available, do you think it's a good budget drivetrain even for normal bikes? I think this topic could make a great separate video too to start the discussion. Hey, do you know what? That is a good one, and I've not been able to run the Linkglide that we've had on the set here because Shimano did tell me that one of the components wasn't production. I think it's the derailleur, but I've not ridden it deliberately. I'm waiting for them to give me a green light or send me the appropriate part. Now, a Linkglide, so it's essentially an 11-speed transmission. The chain is heavier duty, the derailleur is heavier duty, and the cassette, if I just lean over here and grab it, it's just really heavy duty. Now, the whole benefit of running this system is that your chain and cassette will last, on average, what Shimano claim, 3 times longer than your regular, whatever brand it is you use, chain and cassette. So if you're a sort of rider that really goes through this stuff, they're kind of pushing this towards the e-bike market for obvious reasons, because the sheer amount of power that's put through the actual chain and cassette there. It makes sense. And yeah, absolutely, of course you can benefit from that on a regular bike. The downside is the cassette is very heavy. It's a lot heavier than most 12-speed cassettes, the budget 12-speed cassettes. Now, yes, it's not a problem because of the fact it's exceptionally good in terms of wear, but also you could feel that effect on the suspension on your bike, because moving that suspension, moving your rear wheel up and down all the time, sort of your sprung mass to unsprung mass ratio, you kind of want the wheels to be as light as possible really in relation to your frame, which is why typically e-bikes, the suspension feels amazing because your frame is much heavier by comparison to the wheels, so the wheels can really move around. So in an ideal world on a regular bike, if you want your suspension to work best, you want a lighter cassette, but obviously that comes at a price. So it's all about compromise on mountain bikes. And yeah, if you're going through transmissions, then yeah, I would 100% recommend that. I think it's a really good option. But like I say, I think this is a pre-production unit, which is why I've not ridden it. But definitely keen to get that on a bike ASAP and try it out. Next up, from Lotion67. How do I decide if I should have normal length spindles or the long spindles on my pedals? Well, the roadway would be talking about Q factor, and it's very important on road bikes. And I say probably the same for cross-country bikes, and if you're, I don't know, doing bike packing or something where you're doing substantial time in the saddle, it's going to be of vital importance to get your Q factor absolutely dialed in. But it's not just the pedal spindle. You can also move the cleat on your shoe as well. And then there's going to be the Q factor of your cranks. There's many things that come into account here. Now, I actually run long spindles on most of my bikes, and I have to sort of play around the Q factor accordingly otherwise. And the reason I run the longer spindles is quite simply because I've got big feet, and secondly, where I like to run my cleats quite far back on the pedal, if you've actually got the shorter spindle, it can make it nearly impossible to clip out at certain angles. You know, the obvious angles you can still get out, but otherwise your toe, my toe actually hits on the crank quite a lot of the time. So I end up running a longer spindle and having to adapt other parts of the ride there to get the right feel there. But you can say as well, a wider Q factor is going to feel way more stable. Look at downhill bikes, they've got a big wide platform rather than closer together. But obviously the further apart you are, the least effective it's going to be for endurance riding when you're really in the saddle for a long time. So if you're sort of rider that moves around on the bike quite a lot, you're not always in the saddle, going for a wider stance on the pedals is actually quite a good thing. But if you're sort of rider that does serious miles, you want to be careful because you want to make sure that your knees are aligned correctly with your ankles and your pedal line to make sure everything's working good. So there's a few factors that come into account here. If anyone's got any recommendations on the Q factors that they like to run, or in particular with running the long spindles or the shorter spindles, let us know in the comments down there. But typically speaking, you'll find cross-country bikes will be running the shorter ones, and trail and sort of enduro bikes upwards will be running the slightly wider ones. Like I say, the shoe does make quite a big difference. Clumpier the shoe, the further apart your feet are going to need to be to clip in and out. If you're running a cross-country shoe, where it's really quite slender, you don't really have the same problem. So you've got the benefit of being able to run your feet nice and inboard on the cranks for efficiency. Next from EasyChard, is there a way to measure what your chain line should be without needing the frame or BB crank manufacturer information? Well, yeah, kind of, there is, but you've got to bear in mind there is a guide as well. So your chain line is literally middle of your frame tube to middle of where the chainring would be, and it's that measurement. So I've got some illustrations here that are going to come up on screen. So if you've got a 135mm back end on your bike, the chain line you want to be looking to roughly 48 to 50 millimeters. Don't get me wrong, you can be either side of that, but that's a good sort of baseline to go for. The same if you have a 142mm spacing on the back end. Up with 148mm, which is boost, so that's probably the most common on more up-to-date bikes that you see these days. You're looking at 51 to 53mm generally. However, there are some rules to the exception. I'll use Yeti as the example here because they've got a cross-country frame, and the chainstays come out at such an extreme angle to give loads of tyre clearance that accordingly you need to have even wider. So I think theirs is a 55mm, I'm going to say. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is. But typically 51 to 53 with boost. And then a super boost, which is 157mm at the rear, and you're looking at 56.5mm. But they are guidelines. I mean, that would be optimal for getting the best range of gears and making everything run smooth, but you can move around a bit within that. So yeah, well, good luck with that. Next up is from Dave Barker. Okay, so this is another question in relation to the Mondraker that I built for the Ultimate Bike build, the one you can see on screen now. Dave says, what is Mind Telemetry all about? You've got it on that Ultimate Bike build Mondraker. Can it be fitted to non-Mondraker bikes? Is it like the telemetry system you had in the videos with Suspension Doctor? And will we see this sort of thing on more bikes? Okay, so well, the first one is this is an exclusive system, at least currently, to Mondraker. I say that because they don't have any plans, or didn't when I spoke to them, to basically sell it or do anything to other brands. But we do know that some brands have been speaking to them. Let's face it, they all sort of talk. There's a lot of cross-talk in the industry because people need to know what's going on so they can work together. Now, currently, it's only available on their bikes because the fact that the rear system is part of the rocker. It's actually straight into there, so of course that would only be possible. But the front, I'm saying that because it's just over there. The front, yeah, because it's just retrofittable to, in this case, a Fox 36. However, the kit is sold as a front and rear unit, so I can't imagine there'd be any benefit to just having it on the front, even if you could buy one. Now, what does it do? So essentially it measures the distance where you are in your sag, so your dynamic sag, and it can make pretty flipping accurate measurements and sort of decisions for you on how you set your suspension up. So the idea is you put your body characteristics in, like your weight, the way that you like to ride, i.e. aggressively, or maybe, as in like, could be a cross-country racer and you want a firm suspension feel, or you might be a comfort-based rider who's going slower and wants the suspension to track the ground a bit more. You put in sort of your preferences into the app. And then it will make a recommendation on a base setting to try first, and that will be the air pressure for the rear shock and for the fork, and also compression and rebound adjustment according to the particular models that you have on there, which is really cool. And I'm actually completely running the base setting on there at the moment, and most of the time it's been excellent. I've not felt a reason to change it yet. Now it's really quite cool because you set the sag up like that, and then the idea is you go for a ride. Now when the device is on the bike and it's fully charged up, it just charges with USBs and it seems to last ages. One of the things it does is it's essentially got GPS in there as well. It's got accelerometer, so it knows exactly what is going on with you and your riding. So it'll be measuring how far you're traveling, how fast you're going. All this information could be set and synced straight to Strava if that interests you, and various other bits of software as well. But the Mondraker app itself will give you a map basically, and it'll tell you where you've been, how fast you've gone, how high you jumped, how far you flew, how long you were in the air for, like 0.5 of a second or 2 seconds or whatever it might be, how much travel you used on the front wheel and the rear wheel, and it can base on your average settings on your suspension. So if you look at it, and even if it says that your suspension is like the perfect setting for you, you can quickly work out if you need to make adjustments, because if you're using all the travel all the time on a ride, that's obviously not the most optimum, because you want to be saving a bit, and it might be not quite as efficient as it should be. So you can use the app essentially to measure these things. Now, where it's going in future, I don't quite know, but they did kind of hint that they built software into the actual hardware ready for the next stage. And they were saying that the hardware itself is going to be able to do all sorts of things like axle speed and things that you see on higher end telemetry. But the problem they had was with the actual software itself. So they've got a desktop app, which is much more powerful than what you have on the phone. What you have on your phone or your pocket device, it can't actually record enough information onto there to benefit yet. So what they've already got is amazing. I can't wait to see what the next software release will give us. So I'll get in touch with them actually and find out a bit more. So I think there's a video we can make you looking at things like shock weirs and tyre weirs and all of the sort of additional things out there to help you get the best out of your setup. But currently it's not quite the same thing as what Suspension Doctor was offering. That really is a unbelievably accurate way of setting your bike up. But the major advantage you have with Mind over that is it's on your bike the whole time. So, you know, your bike might need setting up slightly differently for different courses. You know, if you're riding somewhere really steep and you're diving too much on the front travel, it's going to make recommendations on, you know, you need some more low speed compression and you probably need to have a slightly firmer fork or a softer rear end. Like, it's a wicked system. Mondraker tell me it's going to be on much more of their bikes from next year. So I'll report back when I've spoken to them a bit more. And another question related to this. God, it's all the Mondraker questions here today from Ads PRS. Such a beautiful bike. I'm still torn between the Raze or the Foxy. I ride mostly Llandegla as it's my closest place to ride, but I enjoy bike parks more when I have the time to ride them. Not so sure whether I need to go for more travel. Okay, well this is really down to you. I don't want to influence this. The way I see it is I would much rather have a bike that's better for the bulk of my riding, and then if I'm just doing like a day that's something a bit more hardcore, like an uplift day, I just have to like adjust my bike slightly differently and just accept the fact it's not quite the perfect tool for the job. I'd much rather it's better for everything else. You might think the other way around, of course. You might want something that has way more capability, that you don't need it all the time, but you've got it for that one occasion that you really want to rely on the bike. So that is something that you need to figure out for yourself. All I can say is both of those bikes, they're very, very capable and they're both very light as well. So the Foxy won't hold you back, but you might not be using its full capability, which could be a bit of a waste. Whereas the Raze might suit you a bit better. Very tricky one. Viewers out there, what would you do in this case? Would you go for the slightly more travel option and do it that way, or slightly less? Let us know down there. And last one this week, oh, this is a corker as well. I've seen this before, but we haven't used it. From Network Ned, who says, what do you believe is the limit on the number of sprockets on a rear wheel? Do you think we'll ever get to the point where bikes are spec'd with 2x12 or 13 to get an absolutely ridiculous gear range just because you can? I really hope not. It's hard to say. I mean, 13 speed already exists. Rotor have got the hydraulic 13 speed transmission, which is beautiful. I've not ridden it, or I've tried it like on a turbo trainer just to go through the gears, and it worked really well. But I can't believe that you would need more than a 52.2 sprocket on the back, in which case the more gears you put on, the only thing that I could see being an improvement is closer steps between those gears, rather than giving you a massive gear. You certainly don't want to go any smaller than a 10 tooth at the bottom there. I mean, a 9 at an absolute push, which is what E13 offer with their cassette. Definitely don't want to go any more than that, because you're just going to wear things out quicker. But with all this being said, around 1996, 1997, as you can see on screen, Shimano filed a patent for a 14-speed cassette. Yeah, in the mid-90s, 14-speed cassette. So the technology's there, but perhaps they wanted to protect something they designed, protect something that they were going to design in future, or perhaps they just wanted to see if it could be done and thought, right, we better make sure this one's safe. But interesting stuff. I don't think we need any more gears, but part of me would love to build a bike with the most ridiculous amount of tech on it. Imagine having a full suspension bike with a gearbox on there, and then, I don't know, like 14 speed on the rear with the rear hub as well, like a roll-off hub, and then maybe a cassette as well. Would it be completely pointless? Yeah, it would. But it'd be kind of fun, wouldn't it? Just building just something absolutely ridiculous. In fact, if you've got any suggestions for me along those lines of just building the most random thing to try it for a bit of fun, really, and a bit of experiment, tech can get a bit serious. I want it to be a laugh here as well. So let us know in the comments down there. And thank you very much for watching the show. It's much appreciated. Like I said, if there's anything I can help you with, or if Anna can help you with, or collectively we can help you with, please do get involved in the comments underneath. Until next week, see you later. Take care.